Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. Black people just keep looking for celebrity friends, particularly white allies, and we're always shocked and amazed that we never seem to have any, or any of those who do make good sounds for a moment, but eventually they inevitably break bad on us. Of course, that brings us to, or rather brings us back to Bill Maher. Now, Bill Maher is a mouth-frothing racist. Everyone knows it, and yet for some reason he seems to have no problem finding white liberals who are perfectly willing to go on his show no matter what he says, at least regarding black people. And it's not just the white ones, there's black celebs too. Sure, there's a lot of C, D, E, and Z list nobodies who are just glad to be on TV because at least it gives them something they can say as they try to get themselves a deal to write some articles or a column for a newspaper or, heavens to Betsy, a book deal. But that's not all of them. There's other people who have no business being anywhere near this creep. And sure, it's not exactly like Bill Maher's been bringing Denzel Washington on his show or anything, but you gotta wonder if Denzel would say no if invited. Seems there's nothing that Bill Maher can say, at least regarding black people, that would induce the Z-list nobodies he brings on his show to refuse to come on there. That is, unless Bill Maher decided that he was going to talk grimy about the LGBT community or the Jewish community or abortion the way that he does against black people. Bill Maher, as part of his regular litany of anti-black vitriol, recently whined that liberals want to twist history to control the present. This is a hardcore right-wing propaganda talking point. That's the old, pathetic white guilt line. It's an empty talking point used mostly by the white right-wingers, though also those on the left who try to call themselves moderates, as a way to say that the beneficiaries of white privilege and of American racism have nothing to feel bad about their behavior or what's happened in the past that built the foundation of the present. And if black people mention the blatantly racist nature of American society and those who have benefited from it, well, that's just black people trying to guilt-trip white folks. This is the well that Bill Maher draws from when he claims people, always talking about black people because he never mentions Asians, Hispanics, or anyone else when he's talking about history, but he claims that people are trying to use history to control the present. He uses these words history and such as euphemisms for black. Of course, he went into a full-on defense of America's founding slave owners and basically said that they didn't know any better and it's just wrong to judge them by the standards of today's morality. Keep in mind, this is the exact same 21st century America where you gotta have nationwide protests just to have the police held accountable for killing black people. This is the same America where you got white racists still dragging black folks from behind cars and ganging up on black people and committing hate crimes blatantly in the streets, and you got the government saying there's nothing they can do about it. Seems to me that America's moral standards haven't changed one iota in 500 years. People like Bill Maher and the right-wing nuts, they love to lionize and worship the founding slave owners because of how brilliant and perfect the Constitution is, or so they say. Most of them don't even know what's in it. And how these brilliant slave owners invented the idea that all men are created equal. Bill Maher and the white right praise the founding slave owners as brilliant men who pioneered the concept of universal equality. Then in the very next breath, they claim that these geniuses literally didn't know right from wrong, even when they spent their time writing treatises about it. Of course, they knew the difference between right and wrong, but the only people whose well-being they cared about was their own. And if that's what the United States is based upon, then you can't defend America or the people who founded it. And that's what it's about. People like Bill Maher, they want to ignore the past so that they can defend the present. It's the only way they can do it. The condemnation that the founding fascists of the U.S. receive is not based on the morality of 2022, I've already told you about that, but it's based on the morality of their own time. You had abolitionists before 1776. The abolition of slavery was discussed during the First Continental Congress. Those slave owners talked about it, but mostly it was just spitballing ideas. And today you even have white historians who try to claim that slave owners like Thomas Jefferson and others had called for an end to the importation of enslaved Africans to the 13 colonies. Now, first of all, I imagine that this is a vast exaggeration, if not an outright falsehood, but for the sake of argument, we'll go ahead and say that it's unquestionably legit. Well, hell, that makes their behavior even worse. Because when you mention that the main slave owners of the U.S. were themselves, allegedly, trying to end or at the very least roll back the slave trade in North America, then you can't escape the fact that they knew what they were doing was wrong. And that being the case, it makes their behavior even more egregious because they held all black people that they owned in captivity until the day they died. It's hypocrisy and meaningless. To end a slave trade after you already have dozens, if not hundreds of people already enslaved on your own plantation? Thomas Jefferson and George Washington weren't looking to acquire more plantations, so for them to cut off the importation of black folks into the country would have been economically pointless for them. It didn't mean anything because it didn't cost them anything. It didn't affect them. These were just empty gestures at best. But Bill Maher has no more use for a history book than Ron DeSantis. You hand that inbred ignoramus a history book, he's likely to just wipe his behind with the pages. He'll think that's what it's actually for. Bill Maher is the one trying to hide behind a historical discussion to cover up his own present-day racism, and he thinks he's slick. What he wants to say is that he's butthurt that racists like himself keep getting called out for their racism, but he can't say that outright, so instead he refers to slave owners from the past, and he defends them to the hilt. This is a distinction without a difference. Their racism and immorality reflects his own. Bill Maher's been super mad since Ice Cube checked him to his face and didn't give him any wiggle room or say, "Well, Bill, I know you ain't like that." No, Ice Cube told Maher to his face that just because you sleep with a black woman doesn't give you a pass, because racists like Maher think that it does. It's one thing to hang out with chicken-head hood rat thoughts and dusty dudes who you buy weed for, but Ice Cube wasn't some dusty dude desperate to have a white man's approval, so he checked Maher and that burned his soul, especially when his own audience applauded Ice Cube for checking him. Bill Maher has been obsessed with Islam. Now, Maher claims to be non-religious, he even made a so-called documentary about it, but Maher's objections to Islam are rooted in the Arab world's antipathy toward Israel, a religious state. Bill Maher acts as if Arabs are blowing stuff up each and every day, and he totally ignores the white supremacist violence going on there. The FBI says that the biggest internal national security threat to the United States are white supremacists. Bill Maher, however, feels that this makes him feel put upon as a white man. You don't see him talking about that. Instead, he's still talking about Arabs as if there was a 9/11 going on every day. Meanwhile, the real national security threat, who are holding racist rallies where they run people down with their cars, and they even tried to storm the Capitol and take over the country. All the while you had members of that mob on January 6th wearing hoodies that said Camp Auschwitz with the letters 6MWE, which stands for 6 million wasn't enough. This is what they were doing, but Bill Maher doesn't seem to have the same full head of steam for them. He treats that as an anomaly, not as something that deserves his ongoing, never-ending condemnation. So, some Arabs get rowdy in the Middle East. Well, they're doing that against Israel, and Bill Maher happens to be Jewish, so as far as he's concerned, this is a national security threat. Meanwhile, you got the white supremacists running hog wild across the nation, where he actually does live, and Bill Maher's got not much to say about that at all. So he's not a low-key racist, he's just out-and-out racist, and he has been for a long time, but he's not alone. People like Bill Maher, David Simon, and other white so-called liberals who claim to be down with us, they're only halfway polite in our presence, that is, until they get whatever it is they really want, or until they feel that black people are not kissing their behinds with enough affection. Bill Maher is the very definition of white privilege. Does anyone believe that Bill Maher would have a career such as it is, much less a TV show, if he wasn't white? This is why white supremacists obsess so much over what they call facts and trying to manufacture statistics all the time. Because the absolute best justification for anything is because it's moral. That's the highest reason to do something, and it's pretty much inarguable. But anti-black racism isn't moral at all. In fact, it's the antithesis of morality. However, the white supremacists need anti-black racism to perpetuate their own unearned and undeserved positions in the world. You have to justify mistreating black people somehow, but you can't do it on the basis of morality, so you got to invent another basis, one that is immune to morality, one in which you can claim that morality is irrelevant and has nothing to do with it. Hence, the white supremacist hyper-obsession with trying to manufacture anti-black racist facts. Because facts are separate from morality. They lost the argument on the basis of morality, which was what their obsession with using the Bible to justify slavery was based on. The biblical justifications of slavery were moral justifications. But when they lost that argument, they instead shifted to try to find a different rationale, one that they hoped that they could win with, one that didn't require them to say that anti-black racism is right. Instead, it allows them to say that it simply is. Facts are not a justification at all, and they're not supposed to be. Facts are meant to be a rationalization, to take something that is clearly silly or just plain insane and try to make it seem rational and logical and based in reality anyway. White privilege cannot be justified on the basis of morality. Anti-black racism cannot be justified on the basis of morality. And when you have people like Bill Maher who owe every crumb of their daily bread, or in his case, every puff of his daily weed, to white privilege, well, he has to protect it somehow. So he tries to manipulate, mangle, and mutilate facts in the hopes that he can get away with protecting his own white privilege. And there's plenty of people who will play along, including a number of black ones. So we're going to keep calling out the Bill Mahers for the racist lies they promote, and call out the black people who go on his show anyway. He's no different and no better than Tucker Carlson, OAN, or any other right-wing sewer. We're not giving a pass to 18th century slave owners, and we're not giving a pass to racist wannabe comedians either. That's just a fact. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Shrampstein, Justin Marcus, Andrew Murphy, Daryl Bledsoe, and Michael Clark. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.